Okay, I'm very excited to welcome Ludmila Praslova to the show. Ludmila, please tell us a bit about yourself and your work.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Ludmila Praslova. I'm professor of industrial organizational psychology at Vanguard University of Southern California. I also am a writer. I know you will be mentioning my book, The Canary Code, and that book is specifically focused on neurodivergent people in the workplace and how we can make our work organization better for different kinds of minds. And I've also been looking at topics like organizational culture, organizational ethics, and a variety of workplace processes that impact our lives.
Yeah, so one of the main reasons why I'm very excited to speak with you, we know each other from a previous conversation around the Canary Code, as a matter of fact. A big part for me, given that I myself am almost certainly undiagnosed ADHD, I'm kind of in some ways the poster boy. I've had something like 8 or 9 different careers, um, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to get into what the book, which is called "Closing the AA Wage Gap." Again, it's not just prescriptive, right? The prescriptive stuff is great, right? Okay, sure. Here's how to set up your cloud code, or here is how to create a portfolio of web apps or agents or workflows. Here's how to think about the guardrails within your work contract, about the IP that you can develop independently, all the way to what is it to be a fractional executive and how to build your personal brand and start thinking about how to gain clients. But these things tend to be a bit different for neurodivergence for various reasons. Again, obviously, there are very different kinds of neurodivergence. So I wanted to ask you just as a first question, if you look at your work and how you frame inclusion, right? It's a systems problem, and many of the systems in the workplace are frankly not well structured for neurodiverse people. So when you look at how companies deploy AI within this context, right, with all those systems in place, what systemic failures are you looking at in real time within those faulty systems?
Of course, like so many things organizations do, they tend to do things in one size fits all manner, and rolling AI tools is really not that different. It's also an expectation that everyone interacts with interface in the same way and thinks in the same way, which we know it doesn't work. And it doesn't necessarily just hurt specific types of individuals. It's really not a good way to even think about introducing AI or anything for that matter, but especially if you're trying to create a powerful change without considering how different kinds of people may respond to it, you may end up with something completely opposite. And so one thing obviously is that tools are kind of designed for the more or less typical mind. Obviously, they're all different depending who designed them. Maybe someone infused them with some of the, ADHD or autistic flavor. But for the most part, we design everything in this life for typical-ish or neurotypical-ish or whatever is generally seen as such in the society, because we know it's a social construct rather than the specific brain structure, and neuronormativity is a social construct. But for in general, we do design tools for the same kind of mind. We forget that people learn differently. We forget that people don't just think differently, people emotionally process it differently. So we might have very different emotional reactions to AI rollout depending on neurotype, the extent of prior trauma someone experienced. We also do know that neurodivergence unfortunately correlates with the experience of trauma, because the world can be very brutal on certain neurotypes, and none of those things are considered. So emotional reactions are not considered. And then we're reading that a lot of Gen Zs really, really hate it. Well, guess what? Lots of Gen Zs also report being neurodivergent and having a lot of anxiety. None of that is considered. And I didn't even get to ADHD and autism. And so there's actually impact on mental health that's not considered, and the interaction between mental health and AI rollout. But even how people use those tools, who needs what? Someone who is super creative but needs a lot of organization tends to interact with the system very differently than someone who is extremely organized and likes help with idea generation. Their mindsets are completely different. And then there's all kinds of variations in between. So if people do have an opportunity to sort of train their AI and it's kind of flexible, that's one thing. But then there are concerns about privacy. What if someone is going to steal the way they're thinking from that AI? A lot of people are concerned about that, and just a lot of ethical issues and the lack of transparency. And then you bring in justice sensitivity, which also tends to come with certain neurotypes.
Yes.
So then we have many autistic people or ADHDs or other people saying, what's the social justice issue here? And that's the whole other conversation that we're not having nearly enough. And so there's just this whole, it's not just cognitive, but it's emotional, it's social, and the sense of justice, Molotov cocktail, really.
The wide range of issues are clustered into something that is oversimplified, to put it mildly.
Right.
When we
And I
talk
didn't
about
even get to the point that AI output also kind of tends to go towards the average and actually miss the most creative things that neurodivergent brains
absolutely.
produce. How's that
Yes,
helpful?
exactly. No, that's a whole other hive of bees. But let's
Right.
let's look at it like this. So the AI wage gap thesis, right, which is the organizing principle for this book, looks at the gap, which is already very significant between people that are AI fluent and AI naive. Let's put it that way. And the numbers show that this gap is widening. Now, when we look at this from the vantage point of neurodiversity, are neurodivergence being left out of this conversation of how do we increase AI adoption, or how do we get people to build using AI? What does that look like? Because there's seemingly in media, we have a lot of stories where neurodivergence might embrace AI and run with it and find some incredible ways to not just catch up, but potentially overtake many neuroneurals. But it's clearly not a black and white scenario, right? Clearly, there are lots of biases within AI itself, within its output, as you just mentioned, right? And maybe certain modalities through which AI is rolled out are not well suited to neurodivergence. So maybe help us think through this question. Is the way that AI is being rolled out and adopted within organizations, is it generally helpful, harmful, somewhere in between? Maybe you have some specific examples.
Yes, and that is where I think the term neurodivergent is too broad, because neurodivergent could be literally anything from developmental neurodivergence, but even within that, we have multiple patterns within ADHD, multiple patterns within autism, multiple variations within dyslexia, and then we didn't even get to the broader neurodivergence, which could be anything from long COVID to brain trauma to both extremes of intellectual ability, because it's not just what people usually consider as problematic things. Many people consider that as when your intelligence is much higher than average, you're also considered neurodivergent. So whatever direction you are different from the typical or average, which doesn't exist. I'm using air quotes when I
Yes.
say typical or average, because again, those are social constructions.
Mhm.
So it's, how are you going to compare someone who is let's say has a combination of ADHD and anxiety and high intelligence, or someone who has a combination of average intelligence, depression, and dyslexia or something. It's those are completely different kinds of people, and so we're already talking about different kinds. And it seems like if your book is mostly oriented towards professionals, we're already living in chunk of humanity outside that don't people who are not in professional jobs and are not even interested in professional jobs. Maybe they like being gardeners or something that's not within our white collar world. But if we even narrow it to our white collar world, there are still so many different cognitive and emotional profiles that can, in different ways, benefit from different tools. And yes, of course, the different tools would need to be, are they relying on text? Are they relying on speaking? I think some people greatly benefit from the ability to interact with AI by talking. I'm not going to even bother to try this feature. I'm not interested in it, because give me text and I'm happy. Uh,
Yeah.
and then other people like, let me get away from text and never see it. So everything is completely different. And if it is something that allows people to tailor something to their life, to take over something that they don't like, it could be wonderful. And we do know that many, you cited this research to me, that many ADHDers love AI tools and they feel supported. But no, again, not everyone. So, for example, I'm happy to outsource some tedious tasks. I'm very high in need for cognition. I like doing my own thinking. I get annoyed when someone gives me those answers and they haven't considered A, B, and C. And
Very average answers for the most part.
hmm?
Very average answers, essentially, right?
Right. So it's very different. And again, there are many psychological variables. They're not necessarily cognitive variables, but they're very relevant. So it's risk tolerance, it's ambiguity tolerance, it's risk taking, which actually are uh, not just like sometimes people say, oh, I'm so risk tolerant and I'm a better human being. Well, that's because you had less trauma and probably
Yeah, exactly.
have different relationship with poverty than other people.
That's right. That's right.
So there is absolutely zero to brag about your psychological makeup. And if your body is interacting with stress differently than another person's, we have this little thing going on that, well, if you're not stress tolerant, you might just as well die off. And that's a
Yeah.
conversation sometimes we hear. Well, losers will stop reproducing. And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but that's like the literal things you read. And so there's a lot of things that I think people are not considering that are on the interaction of technology, psychology, and ethics. But psychology and ethics are very much losing in that conversation.
I mean, it's very important that you bring up the wealth of factors involved. Maybe let me introduce one idea. This is very practical, literally what I've done, right? So I'm someone who I've worked in the corporate world. I've not been, I would say, I've not had anything like a linear path within the corporate world. I've worked in startups, I've worked in Fortune 500, financial services, healthcare, startups, built my own companies, etc. So very much the hallmark of someone who has ADHD and is always kind of on to the next project before too long. What has been, I would say, very helpful for me from using AI is not some general principle. It's actually very specifically building my Claude Code terminal with massive context around who am I, what is my voice, what are my preferences, my previous writing, which has tons of articles, newsletters, books, my work product. And as a matter of fact, how did I even come up with the concept for this book? It's exactly through this process wherein, okay, a year and something ago, I was building an app, career beast mode. And Lovable took me to what I thought was an interesting place. But when actual coders looked at it, they said, okay, no, this is not going to go far. And 4 months ago, I sat and I set up my Claude Code and I started seeing every day 5 different repositories from GitHub that can help me, figure out marketing or sales or, my brand or whatever, right? So I set up my terminal in a way that took all of my context, literally the things I mentioned, and I asked Claude, okay, here's my massive context. Tell me who I am. What am I working on, right? Because again, so many different industries and projects, and actually came up with something adjacent to this very concept, right? I've done learning and development. I've been a head of HR. I've done coaching. I've worried about kind of economic empowerment for certain reasons that you've mentioned, I think. So it actually gave me something pretty well formed, which I then took and elaborated around this AI wage gap. It helped me to do the research around it. Then it helped me to finish that app finally, right? The Career Beast Mode app that has 49 tools to help someone go from sitting in an office and wondering what's going on all the way to building their business. So why I mentioned this kind of very, two very different scenarios. One is I'm someone with ADHD. I fed massive context to Claude Code, which encoded it into what I work with when I start the terminal every day, right? That's one scenario. So that can use my voice, that can do a lot of things at a high level at the start. If, on the other hand, someone who is similar but may not have all that context, right? It may actually cause them a lot more anxiety because they may not trust it. Maybe this doesn't know my voice. This doesn't remember all those other threads that I've already, created. And this doesn't really reflect anything like my potential or allow me to build well. So I'm bringing out those two scenarios maybe to help drive our conversation in that direction. There's the potential of what happens when the guardrails are in place and all the like in the human context in a company. I've worked here for 5 years. Everyone knows me. People know what I can do, and certain things are. I've created certain systems around my work to help me do it better. So let's maybe focus on this idea of something that you bring up, I think, in your work. So you've argued that the workplace was designed for kind of a narrow band of ideal workers. So we talked about these two scenarios. What would you say is AI doing? Is it widening the gap or the band or narrowing it further?
Yeah, I don't think AI is deciding what to do. It's really how it is implemented because there was an article from MIT, I believe, on how you can use it in either augmentative ways to support individuals or organizations can decide it in ways that replace individuals, which is why not everyone even trusts using not as an solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, but as people within organizations. Many people do not trust putting their expertise into AI and their context into AI because they suspect it's just going to be used to replace them. So they are already not using it to maximize the potential because trust is not there, and for a good reason if anybody looked at the news, anytime within the last 2 years. So that's the thing. If someone has already decided that they are going this entrepreneurial path and they reasonably trust that Claude, the whatever plan they're using is not going to steal their brain and run with it, then yes, it could very conveniently build yourself a second brain, and it can support content creation, which I kind of hate the term content creation, and support people with all the whatever other tasks they need to do, from technical to creative, and it can help people build their business. Absolutely. I mean, you can create your second brain and you can create your third brain, and it can definitely process information in ways that are much faster than a human. If you're a human with enough experience who knows when it's processing information correctly and when it's pulling your leg, which takes a lot of expertise. And so someone who already has work experience and a body of work and enough independence to know that maybe Claude on itself will decide to go rogue, but at least you don't have evil bosses who are already planning to go rogue on you, then you can have a tremendous benefit. But there needs to be those several layers. There are people who either have not been creating and putting their brain out there and writing multiple books like you. So that's a little bit different. There are people who are just plain young and have different amount of life experience, and then there are people who need health insurance. I mean, that's another thing that you need to consider. It's a huge barrier to entry into any kind of independent work when your work is tied, when your health insurance is tied to your work. So there's all kinds of structural things that can facilitate or prevent this kind of wonderful adventure of going on your own and building your second, third, and fourth brain that are still kind of your brains, and creating something amazing, which I can see working for some people. But what I also see is that people who are able to do it are starting guilting others and telling others, well, you're a loser and you're not as smart as I am, when I was able to do it without any consideration for, again, variety of disabilities or just structural disadvantages that some people have.
To your point, actually, you might have seen a study. I don't know if listeners have seen the same, but apparently among Gen Z workers, there's something like a 40% or more rate of them sabotaging AI efforts proactively. So when you talk about, I want to save my job because of my health insurance, it's a pretty strong motivator. And it's not a small factor, right?
I saw that, and I mean, people are living in daily state of existential threat, which means they're living in extreme high levels of chronic stress, which actually does things to the brain that are not very good, and it does things to your decision making that are not very good, and like it also destroys your physical health, which I just did a presentation with a company about that. So we have not thought this through whatsoever, and I think we have a lot of wonderful, smart, enterprising individuals who are going to be able to capitalize on this, at least in a short term. But I think societally, most societies, I don't know about Norway and Iceland, but most societies in this world are not prepared to deal with social fallout from all of this, and the potential can be quite extreme if there is no consideration of the group and societal level.
Yeah, like any industrial revolution, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, to put it mildly, but we just know that certain sectors of society will become structurally disadvantaged for at least a very long time unless something really radical happens. And we don't know what that is. There's a survivalist scenario, there's a more optimistic scenario where all of us get retrained in something and we close that gap. The verdict remains. We'll see. Let's mention just briefly, so some ways in which AI might be actively harming neurodivergence. So we might talk about hiring algorithms, right? You have kind of AI interviewing people and, all sorts of issues around anxiety, and you have interview scoring, right? That's kind of AI just decides that someone may not be a fit because, they're anxious or slow to answer or what have you. All kinds of culture fit predictors, which often feed very mediocre or average measures into AI, which again is interviewing or somehow measuring somebody. Productivity surveillance, again, for people that are, let's say with ADHD, right? Just a very simple example. If your timer is measuring your clicks or your taps on your computer, how does that really measure productivity when people like myself or yourself might work in bursts, right? So these are just a few.
Absolutely not an appropriate measure whatsoever.
Yeah. So one question, I think this is very practical. So let's say a CHRO that you're working with comes to you tomorrow and says, all right, we're going to roll out AI across the organization. I would love your help to make sure we don't screw this up for neurodivergent talent. So what are three, I would say, non-negotiable asks that you would have from that CHRO if things are going to work well?
Well, you're giving me three. The Canary Code has 6 principles.
Let's have them all.
If I had to choose, the first one is participation. And anytime you honestly want people to collaborate in anything and contribute and be on their best, you need to ask people, you need to talk to people. Obviously, if you're buying something from a vendor and it's not customizable at all, then it's going to be a fake conversation. But if there's any way of how you can roll it out in stages, or the degree of customization, or which specific tasks are rolled out first because people actually need help with them, and not because vendor has a discount on something because they want to trap you, obviously, but because it's a feature that actually is needed because your people are struggling with whatever XYZ. If you get people participation and actually listen to what they said, you obviously are going to get a lot more goodwill and a lot more trust. It's just an intelligent thing to do for any kind of rolling out anything. I don't even care what it is, and obviously something that could be very significantly impactful as AI. And another thing that AI doesn't do very well at this point is transparency. Obviously, we haven't taught it very well to do transparency because we're not very transparent in our organization. So the same interviews, how they are coded, who put this information in there, is it looking for eye contact for a job that doesn't require any eye contact? Is it using all the same bad measures that have been the plague of the workplace for the last 100 years? We just now automated them in those AI-assisted interviews. By the way, some people like them, and then, of course, many people also hate them. But transparency in what's happening, because so many things are black boxes, and black boxes are scary. And again, we're getting into this whole emotional response and anxiety and physical response to something that we don't know, understand something, we process it as a threat. That's just what our brain is going to do. And calling us Luddites is not going to do anything with the response of our brain. So transparency is another factor that's extremely important. And the justice, the organizational justice principle, that's another part of the Canary Code in this particular situation, because we're kind of taking a society that chugged along very far from perfectly and very far from fairness, but at least in a semi-understandable way. We're completely scrambling it, and we're creating, if we're not careful, a new set of winners and losers. And tell me how many humans like it. And we're just going to, mess with the pyramid, and sometimes it's making the pyramid skinnier, which is not always well received by those who've been already on the bottom, and it's getting like further stretched with any away from any hopes that they had. And again, for other people, it's very beneficial depending on where they are or where they think they are, where they imagine themselves they are. That's a whole other thing. So considerations of justice and whatever form it comes in, whether being transparent about what is happening, or starting reskilling earlier, or whatever it is that you think is going to help people see that you honestly do have an intent of treating them with fairness. Anything you can do, any safeguards you can put in, any worker consoles with actual say in what's happening, all of this would be very helpful. Because if we're doing it right, it can play really well with other Canary Code principles like flexibility. If we're using it right, we can create flexibility for people by using AI. We can also can help focus on outcomes. Again, not the ridiculous outcomes like the clicks, but really the useful output, because nobody wants out anymore because we end up with work slop. But we need to start thinking of outcomes and using it to actually maybe measure outcomes more objectively, because if it can process a lot of information and quality and creativity and timeliness and all that sort of thing, it might actually be better than certain managers, or at least provide additional tool that managers can look at and say, okay, so this actually makes sense and this is usable. But if we don't think in terms of, I think, justice and ethics of what we're doing and participation, we're not going to get very far.
I want to be respectful of your time. Last two questions, if you can. So there's a certain quite assumption that AI tends to reward extroverted generalists that speak quickly, right? Your research suggests maybe the opposite is actually true if we're talking about creating sustained value. So could you make for us the case for why what you posit is true? I mean, you can tell us the numbers.
AI or the workplaces in general, current workplaces?
Okay, I go and do an interview with Micro One or Mercor, right? And Zara interview, I've done this, right? And you might have done this as well. Many of our listeners might have done this, right? So I've done AI training, and it's sort of like you learn to be that fast talking generalist, and you draw upon all sorts of things, and okay, you're rewarded, you get the project, great. But in practice, if we're talking about actually, doing successful projects and creating a lot of value, maybe it's not about speaking quickly or having some kind of generalist intellect. Maybe it's actually the opposite. Maybe it's going very deeply, but maybe it's in a slower manner. Maybe it's the expert is not a fast talker. Maybe they like to take their time to process. So what does that look like in practice, in your research?
Well,
why is the latter more?
Traditional organizations have always rewarded fast talkers because somehow it was mistaken for leadership abilities of fast talking and confidence. And then we get with all the research and that confidence doesn't equal competence. And very often people get charmed by confidence that actually is hiding the lack of competence. And extroversion is helpful. There is a certain correlation between sales jobs and extroversion, for example. So it appears, at least on the surface, that it's helpful in sales jobs. Except there are some high stakes sales jobs where listening is really important. And actually, introverts are generally, on the average, not every personality trait is manifested in the same way in every individual, but generally introverts actually are less likely to interrupt you, and they're actually more likely to listen to you. So yes, even in sales jobs, sometimes if you want to be listened to and understood, introverts can have an advantage. And again, those are just this is a particular type of personality that, for some reason, Western corporate life has put on display, and then you can just compare it with Japanese corporate life, and that's actually going to be different. It's a very cultural thing. So Western cultural settings have over rewarded extroversion because again, it was if you talk fast, it's assume that you think fast and so forth. And I mean, that's a wonderful characteristic. But we also have research that when you have teams, you really have to have a mix, because if you have all extroverts, it's going to be completely dysfunctional. If you have all introverts, it's also not the best. So it doesn't make sense to select for just one variable. But then if we're creating our portfolio career, here we can just build with our strengths, because I'm not going to be selling the way an extrovert sells by talking. I don't do that, but I'm going to listen to someone and I'm going to think about the solution that works for them. So, and I'm not going to try to sell them something that's not going to work for them, because I would rather actually develop something that's tailored to their needs. And I like developing bespoke things for people, and it's a very different business model than selling millions of units of the same things to people. And they're different ways of doing your business. So just tailoring whatever we do to our abilities, that's in AI world or in any other world. You can be successful with very different personality, with very different cognitive styles, if you know yourself. So that's the thing. And you were talking about like feeding your brain products into AI. So knowing yourself is really the key, because you can be autistic, you can be dyslexic, you can be any kind of combination of any kind of traits. But you know yourself, and you have tools and enough control to organize your life about it, and some of it is unfortunately social, then you can definitely create a very satisfying life, because it's going to be based on yourself. And we can talk about it from the point of view of entrepreneurship and solopreneurship. Smart organizations would also allow people to customize, because we've been talking about neurodiversity and job crafting. You can, again, if your kind of organization wants to just use technology to the maximum of their ability to augment the human condition, you can create incredible entrepreneurial opportunities that will move organizations very far, because otherwise you're just going to lose all your good people. But if you created fun things where we could also create those tailored roles that capitalize on our talents, and on the executive level, because I talk about it in the leadership chapter where I talk about you as well. We need leadership teams with diverse cognitive and emotional profiles. And it could also be augmented with various AI capabilities if there's any gaps within that leadership team. But allowing people to focus on something, if you want to develop people, if you want to develop systems, there are different ways we can be creative. So I think organizations could also get very, very creative and benefit their organizations if they just don't think in terms of slash jobs and burn the economy type of style.
Great. You actually you answered more than half of my last question, which was very practical. If you're sitting in that office and you're looking at the wall, but you also happen to be neurodivergent, which again could take a million different permutations. You started alluding to this, right? So if you're going to be going from that cubicle to maybe building your own business, you mentioned two things, right? Before you build anything, which again, for myself as someone ADHD, it's just go build, build, build. No, diagnose, figure yourself out. Maybe feed, again, if you're open to that sort of thing, feed your terminal, your Claude Code or whatever with context. Maybe if you're having a hard time visualizing who are you or where you add value, perhaps your Claude Code can tell you exactly what that is so that you can go and start building your brand or your vertical, even more than just a brand, exactly in that vein. And very practical, maybe you've seen something similar. I'm actually curious about this. So a few weeks ago, I saw a post on LinkedIn, and it was from the CEO of Deel, Deel. Okay, it's a $15 billion company. It's a very special kind of thing with an HR tech and payroll and all that, which to most people sounds awfully boring, but they managed to do something very, very interesting in this company, which is that they have a team of what they call Ghostbusters. You might have heard this term come across. Okay, so these Ghostbusters sounds a little mysterious. It's not Bill Murray there. It's a team of people that they've had for a few years now, which sit directly under the CEO and the COO, answer to both. This team of Ghostbusters are brought internally. Their backgrounds can vary. They can be former consultants, bankers, doesn't matter what, right? Maybe even former coders. And they receive different data sets. They receive different portfolios of this is broken, fix it. Okay. So most of them are not coders. Most of them don't have this, product management background. And they are expected to essentially figure out the full context. So they speak to the, head of the business line or the person who coded this, figure out what is working, what's not working, talk to the customers, figure out all these different things, and then build the solution, meaning use their Claude Code or whatever the hell they do to bust the ghost, right? And build it to maybe 90 to 95%, and then hand it off to the CTO maybe to finish it up. So I'm thinking again, this is one possibility. What I believe is already happening is that many enterprises, whether it's for competitive reasons or because they think, let's not fire everyone like Klarna did in customer service. So let's actually try to help our workers drive massive value by teaching them to build with AI. So we call them Ghostbusters, we call them whatever. I believe this is going to be a very very meaningful proportion of people in any large organization. This layer, which may in fact replace middle management because they can actually go build things. What do you think about this? Do you think this is something promising or it's more pie in the sky?
I think creative problem solving is never pie in the sky. You can call it Ghostbusters, you can call it whatever you want, but it is essentially problem solving, and it seems to deploy human creativity in way it should be deployed. It's also using the diversity, like background diversity, knowledge and area of expertise diversity on those teams in a way that it's meant to be used, because we do bring all those different perspectives from different backgrounds. And it's definitely something that I would actually like to see more in a variety of organizations, because I like that model. And I mean, I've seen something similar in academia. Sometimes people from, different, you get a task force. I mean, we call them boring thing, like a task force, but you get people with all the different backgrounds from, psychology to chemistry to philosophy, and they solve whatever particular current problem is. And obviously, sometimes you need help with getting edges smooth and the group to start working together well. But the idea of people using different backgrounds and doing creative things together, that actually makes perfect sense. And we do know that the heterogeneous diverse teams take some time to learn to work together well, but after that period of time, they really do become extremely incredible in Ghostbusters, and they can identify problems very creatively and they can solve them.
Mila, I want to just thank you profoundly for not only this conversation, but in general for driving the conversation around neurodivergence and what it looks like, which is not always pretty, and what it should look like. I want to give you tremendous credit for being the voice, and certainly in my mind. I really appreciate your contribution to the book and to this. I think it's extremely important to talk about these things, but not by waving hands, by talking about real research and providing real solutions, which you do both. I salute you. Thank you.
You very
Thank you
much.
very much for coming on the show and contributing. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate your work, and this sounds like it will be a very interesting book. So I look forward to learning more and seeing the finished product.
God willing. Thank you very much.